Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 326. We have a wonderful guest, another partner at the Kurzman Law Firm, Kurzman, Ted Zillian Pratt. I've memorized the full name. It's John Pratt in the name. We're going to do a great interview, learn about his background, how he got to immigration. Obviously, all the information here is not intended for individual legal guidance. It's all with an attorney if you're a non-lawyer watching the show. But a quick note, our marriage green card course is happening, and I'm thinking about throwing a bonus in there and having our O1 seminar, the raw footage of there together. If you're interested in learning these two fields, hit me an email and take advantage of special deals. It's probably going to happen for next month or so. So info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com is there. And also we have a PDF I have that I give to clients about the I-693, the medical checkup, on how they could double check with the doctor and what to look out for when scheduling a time and to spot the issues that the doctors have. Giving that PDF for free for community members on our Circle That Is So community page. So if you're interested, you're a lawyer, email me and I could add you there. And you could access this white labeled version of our PDF that you can use. Having said all that, John, thank you so much for coming on the show. Obviously, John Pratt is no stranger to educating the immigration lawyer field. You've done a lot, speaking engagements. I'm sure behind the scenes you're helping on the book, obviously, the Bible for immigration lawyers.
Correct.
Good to meet you. Where are you looking? Where are you at right now?
I'm in our headquarters, so to speak, my Coral Gables, Florida, which is basically Miami, Florida.
Yeah. And are you from there originally? Are you Florida born, raised, or?
No. I'm an immigrant myself. My it's kind of a complicated history, but the bottom line is this: my grandfather was a U.S. Marine stationed in Nicaragua in the 1920s.
Oh, wow.
And after World War II, he decided to move with my dad. So I kind of have like double migration in the sense that I was born and raised in Nicaragua. But my dad got there when he was young, so I couldn't acquire citizenship directly because of the transmission requirements. So in 1979, there was a communist revolution in Nicaragua, and being the offspring of an American and a former U.S. Marine was not the safest. So we had to immigrate eventually to the United States, and I initially came on an E2 visa as a derivative, and eventually, my dad eventually petitioned for us, but I had to go through a petition process because my father didn't have the sufficient physical presence for me to acquire automatically. So having lived in Miami in the 1980s when I moved here as a little kid and there was immigration, everybody had an immigration issue, obviously. Yeah. Made me attuned to that as an immigrant myself. And I mean, at one point I thought that I was going to get deported or, because I had friends that were facing that. I decided to go, once I got to law school, I decided to go in immigration law because I had lived it, experienced it, and I had many friends and family that had immigration issues. So, I had an easier path because my dad was American, but I still had a path to follow.
Quite a story. It's something that issue of transmission is something. I got one case and two cases, and I'm getting bombarded internationally where the USCIS or the DOS didn't properly, gave passports away. Now they're realizing they didn't properly review the 5-year requirements of presence. They're taking passports from people that are 10, 15, even 40 years old. And it's like, it's taking away a piece of your life all of a sudden when you lose your passport. It's really traumatic and dramatic as well. You mentioned 1920 Marine for your grandfather. I'm not sure if you know these stories, but there was a Marine sergeant, maybe a Colonel Smedley Butler, and I think he was running the game over there, and he came and testified in front of Congress and said the war is a racket. They're just hustling to make money off people and stuff. Do you know anything about that? Did your grandpa know Colonel Smedley Butler or anything, or they must have known each other?
No, I've never heard that part of the story. I mean, like I said, I know Grandpa was because he fought in World War II. So after World War II, he liked Nicaragua, and then eventually moved there when my dad was a little kid. He was like 5 years old or something. But I've never heard that part of the story of that gentleman that you're mentioning. but I do know, because when I went to law school and when I finally, I was a teenager when I found out that, what I have, I need to, and because I got my citizenship in 1992. So at that time, I got to law school in 97. In 92, I was aware, and I found what is my status? What the hell am I? And then eventually I was able to piece it out and figure it out, obviously. But yeah, my dad eventually had a petition for us, and I was underage, and thank God I was still an immediate relative. I didn't go into the preference categories. So, that was, again, an interesting tidbit, because obviously, my dad, was a citizen automatically, but he didn't have the physical presence of 5 to 10.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I've done a number of cases there, including expatriation cases, which is there's different rules, right? If you were born before 1934, the rules are different. So, and the Kurzban book, pitching it in, has a great chart of when were you born and what kind of transmission requirements are there, because it's shifted through the years. They're not all the same.
That reminded me, I have a potential case. I'm so glad we talked, where I'm like, I got to ask the exact age of this woman who's dealing with this, because it's such a political thing. They keep moving the goalposts back and forth on this. So I got to follow up with her on that. Make a note for myself. Okay. So you get college, and how did you fall into immigration? Was it because of this history, or you just the first job that came along? That's how it happened to me. It was the first job that came along. I got it.
No, to be honest with you, I did an immigration clinic. I went to Tulane Law School in New Orleans. So I majored in philosophy and economics at Florida State. Eventually, I ended up at Tulane in New Orleans. There was an immigration clinic. I had an affinity for immigration. People would ask me even when I was in law school, what is this? What is that? I had gotten married at that point in time, and I had done the petition for my wife because she was Peruvian and I was American. So I had done it for her, and I had figured it out. And by the time I got to law school, there was an immigration clinic, and I felt like, I want to do that. And then, once I did the clinic, I really liked it. I speak Spanish perfectly. And I thought, I have a kind of comparative advantage. I know a little bit about immigration. I've done it. And Spanish helps. Obviously, living in Miami, Spanish community, etc. And I kind of liked it, to be honest with you. So the first job right out of law school, I kind of basically looked for immigration positions because that's what I liked. A couple of jobs offered me, corporate, whatever. Like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do that. So I've been in immigration since I graduated. And even before that, I figured, I wanted to practice immigration law.
So having a Peruvian wife, do you guys make lomo saltado at home? Or because I go to restaurants, it's so inconsistent. If I had someone I could go to.
It is. Well, I unfortunately now I'm sharing my life with everybody, but I got divorced from my first wife. So I have a son who's American, but Peruvian also. I love lomo saltado. I love Peruvian food. Is amazing. It's really, really good. And if you get to Peru, the food is even better there because of the seafood.
Wonderful.
The seafood that's there is a lot better than, for example, you find in Miami. But yes, the Peruvian food is top notch.
So you've been practicing for a bit. I mean, when would you say you started practicing immigration law? Like early 2000s?
Well, I graduated in 97.
Mm-hmm.
I graduated in 97, and I started right away. Right after graduation. So I started since 1997.
So you saw the restructuring with, INS becoming DHS and that insanity and 245I.
I did see that insanity. IRR had already passed. So by the time that when I was taking immigration law courses in law school, what I remember is like, well, the law's changing. So everything you're learning here is not going to be because, it was the deportation and exclusion. Then it got removal. So I was doing that shift, but then yes, after September 11, I was there for the whole restructuring of the insanity onto DHS, INS ceasing to exist, and and how that whole affected. Yes, I was there at that time, and I've been doing EB-5 since that since I graduated, and EB-5 back in 97, 98 was a different animal than you have now. And there were things I remember just discussing with my partner, the partner that I was working at a law firm, very well-known lawyer, still practicing, one of them still practicing. And I would ask him, look, this doesn't make any sense. Because there were things back then that didn't make any sense. Yeah. But so I've been privileged to have worked in immigration law since, because I knew that's what I wanted to do, to be honest with you. At one point, I was at a big firm. And, there was some restructuring. They're like, well, we could send you to the litigation department, which I'm a litigator. I litigate, but I litigate immigration cases. And they gave me a sample of litigating the grass that the University of Miami football field had. They got the wrong grass. And I just thought, Jesus, I don't want to be doing that. I really don't care what kind of grass or what types of different grasses are there for different uses. I just... immigration is fascinating because if you do removal defense, there's immigration issues, right? If you do asylum, you're finding out, history and all these other things. If you do corporate or business immigration, there's business concepts that, you dwell a little bit into corporate law or business law. So that's the fascinating thing about immigration, how it affects different fields.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of EB-5, so I mean that was the pinnacle of the old thing, and then they essentially shut it down for many years, and then it came back again in 2009. So it was ups and down. When you were starting, was it still where USCIS or INS, you would just go there to pick up the forms, and you have to hand it to them in person at a local office before the lockbox system is developed?
You did. You had the ability to file in person. You had the ability. We would get the forms ahead, but I remember paralegals typing the forms.
Yeah.
There was the beginning of some software that were DOS based. If anybody knows what DOS based is, I mean, it was very crude, just kind of inputting and imprinting it. So that was but most of the forms when I started in 97, they were actually typewritten by a paralegal. And for example, the G325 had like 3 carbon copies and different colors. That was the biometric stuff. And I remember being able to go to physically, you had to make a line at USCIS, and there were different processes that obviously all of that has changed.
This thing about immigration, though, it seems like every 10 or 15 years, there's like massive, complete turnarounds and shifts in how they do stuff. So you could be a new person in the field, and you're all of a sudden at the same level playing field as someone's been doing for 20 years because you all have to like reinvent the wheel. Okay, I have a new program, the pro in place. How are they going to do it? Or like travel bans happen. No one's ever heard of that before. Like, and you got to figure it out. So it keeps
correct. And even I think it's the only piece of legislation that I can remember that there was a new EB-5 law passed in 2022. So that kind of revamped different things. And now you have an old law and a new law and 2 different sets of investors. So I agree with you that, you got all these different concepts, and we get a new administration. What's going to happen to TPS? What's going to happen to parole in place?
And your firm has been so active in TPS on a lawsuit for the Haitian clients, Haitian TPS. And when it comes to TPS, you're really winning it. Are there any lawsuits in the mix that you have ongoing right now?
We're litigating a lot of different things in EB-5, to be honest with you. So there's a big issue in the EB-5 world in source of funds, trace of funds, whereby USCIS is re-adjudicating source of funds, trace of funds. I think, honestly, because I've done some FOIA litigation also. We've gotten a lot of there's a lot of source of funds, trace of funds, but national security things, Iranian nationals, Chinese, some Ukrainians, etc., where they're really looking at how the money was obtained. So, for example, one big issue right now with a lot of Chinese is that they're going after former Huawei employees to say that even though they were just employees, their sources are tainted because Huawei now we feel is a bad company. And we're fighting some of those cases. We're litigating some of those cases. We won some. We recently did an amicus with another colleague of mine on the issue of revocations to the Supreme Court. I don't know if the Supreme Court is looking at the issue of can you litigate a revoke petition, and it's a family-based petition, and the issue there is pretty bad because when you revoke let's say an I-130 petition, an I-140 petition, an I-526 petition, most courts have said there's no jurisdiction in federal court to review the revocation. So you have the insanity that if it gets denied, you could sue under the APA, but not if it gets revoked. And we convinced a few regional centers and an organization that advocates on behalf of investors to do an amicus on the EB-5 employment-based perspective, because the government argued there that, well, what's the big harm if we revoke it? Just file it again, get it denied, and then sue. Yeah, but in some cases, getting it denied, you lose CSPA coverage, you lose 10 years of being in the line. I mean, an EB-2, EB-3, you really want to go back to wiping out the priority date? Are you insane in an EB-5 context? So, we have our interesting federal court cases in immigration, which I love. I mean, I'm lucky to participate in that.
But, immigration is such like this side law area that like doesn't get attention. The judges probably don't know it. I imagine just like explaining what you just told me right now, which I get because I do this practice, but explaining this to someone who doesn't deal with it every day, it's its own thing itself. Like about priority dates, about like what the intensity of CSPA, the Child Status Protection Act. Like these are like concepts that they don't really know, and I bet their clerks don't really know that directly because not that they deal with it every day. It's not a civil litigation, all that kind of stuff. Is the extra that's why we see decisions sometimes come out that don't make sense in immigration space because they don't grasp the whole law because it's just such a nuanced side area of the law that people don't deal with.
It's a challenge, and a lot of times it's a challenge because you don't have a hearing, right? So it's just written paperwork. So, for example, we litigated one L1A case where they denied the petition, but they put the gentleman was here, so he was doing a change of status from B to L. So they put the person in proceedings, and the district court incorrectly said you haven't exhausted administrative remedies because there's a removal proceeding. And we try to explain to the court that, wait a second, the L cannot be reviewed by the immigration judge. The judge is reviewing the beneficiary status or whether he has status or not, but not the petition, the L petition. She cannot review it and say, yeah, the L should have been it's improperly denied. But she denied it, saying, oh, you need to exhaust administrative remedies, go through the removal process before you go to the district court. So we appealed that to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. It took like 3 years.
Wow.
But eventually we won an appeal at the 11th Circuit Court on a dissent that correctly said, well, wait a second, different parties, beneficiary versus petitioner, different forums, removal proceedings versus a district court. Everything's different here. And the district court judge just, made it up.
Even if they're approved, then I mean, the business is probably like not continuing, or the job is not there. It's like really like disruptive for that kind of delay.
Totally. And sometimes, especially, now Chevron, everybody's praising, oh, Chevron's gone, it's all great. I hope so.
Yeah.
I remain hopefully optimistic, but conservatively, I mean, because some courts are not friendly, they're not friendly to some of these petitions. I mean, and like you said, in some of these decisions, deference or not, what happened to us in Patel, for example, that was all statutory. And the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals reversed itself, and both parties were arguing for jurisdiction. I don't know if I guess your listeners know what Patel is, but it was a big decision where the court itself ruled it on the statute, right? That there's no federal court review to check on I-485 denial, except in removal proceedings. And even if some federal court review survives, it's in very limited circumstances.
Yeah.
But it's a challenge. Federal courts are a challenge. But, I still, one of the benefits by going to federal court when you're challenging an APA review is sometimes you still get a judgment. I mean, a deal. Basically, okay, we'll approve this or we'll that. And sometimes you see inconsistencies too, where some courts fight you tooth and nail, and then in other courts, maybe the U.S. prosecutor just says, okay, fine, you know what, we'll approve the I-140.
Yeah.
So we're still seeing some inconsistencies.
I've seen the inconsistency, especially in, I think it's the Sixth Circuit DC area, where when these lawsuits for delays, they're just saying there was a 601A waiver taking 2 years, and they said that's not long enough. But Ninth Circuit, obviously, a little more flexible over here, but who knows? It's topsy-turvy, but the inconsistency is pretty deep.
Absolutely. And the only thing I can say, for example, in the EB-5 arena, a lot of people had to file for mandamuses in the DC Circuit because they don't live here. So the only venue for EB-5 was in the DC Circuit, and the DC Circuit got fed up of, the number of lawsuits. So eventually the DC Circuit and the DC Court of Appeals basically said, look, you just wait. A mandamus is just skipping the line. and the government, to me, artificially would make up these processing times, right? Because an I-526 processing time is like 55 months.
Yeah.
And the court said, you wait, because otherwise you're just skipping the line.
Yeah.
So there's bad case law now, specifically in the mandamus context in some courts.
With these delays, I was reading the Ombudsman's report last week, and they're talking about the way USCIS, even on the website, publish it. It's like 80% of cases are expected to be this much, but 90%, there's another one that says it differently based on 90%. They have these crazy formulas of how they calculate these dates, which to me is essentially a way to push back our ability to complain about the delays. But it's out of control, the inconsistency.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, it would be interesting. I haven't seen any FOIA results, maybe through a FOIA lawsuit, of how they really come up with these numbers. I think they just make them up. That's just my paranoid self. Because, like you said, you try to figure it out. How do they know if they haven't gotten to an adjudication? I mean, they may know what's in the pipeline, but even then, they don't publish. I mean, some of it is not
transparent. They try to wrap their hands around it. They couldn't either. Like, they look at the last 6 months, so they did not. It's just like it makes no one in the right mind would ever do a calculation, and it's misleading because clients see it and they have, or just the USCIS, myUSCIS.gov, the expectation timelines constantly people are like, oh, it's at 3 months, 2 days, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's backlog or 10 more months. Like, what happened? I'm like, just don't even look at these numbers. They don't make any sense. They're only used if we need to do a lawsuit to show that. That's pretty much practically when it comes out. Or else there's no reliability in the numbers they give us.
And I completely agree with you, John, because what they do, what we know they do is you file a mandamus. They said processing times at 55 months. You're at 138. Okay. So what? You have an incentive to put this processing time into infinity? So I'm always under it. So there's a lot of nonsense happening, and unfortunately, there's no transparency, right? No. But I tell people, look, be reasonable. What happened in EB-5 world? Again, some people started suing after 6 months when a petition pending. That's just, we have some lawyers were pushing the envelope, in my opinion. You got to be reasonable. How long you've been waiting? What is the magic word? I don't know. But not 6 months. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? People ask me that all the time. I think you have to use judgment.
Yeah.
But now choosing your venue matters, because if good luck on an I-526 mandamus in the DC circuit.
And there's another thing that's popping up is with, if President Trump or former President Trump comes president again, a travel ban comes to certain countries. Like, I have some cases that are pending interviews or admin processing, and it's only 6 months. And I'm like, typically wait a year at least to push it over. But like, we got to get this in, because January, whatever it is, if a travel ban gets kicked in, or February, then Iranian case, you're another 4 years, you got to wait then, like last time. And then opening up these cases, I still have cases from when Biden started that were opened up. They still haven't had their visa approved. And so these people are waiting for 10 years for an adult child of a green card holder that was qualified to do final action date was approved like 10 years ago. So it just it's for people, it's just so tough. I mean, hopefully with the filing fee increase, especially your EB-5, where they just jacked up the prices. I mean, you got the money now, like hire and train, and the training is difficult enough as it is on that program. But it's like, got to get it together, like, and get this bill going.
Absolutely. I mean, it's challenging all over. I mean, the pace is challenging, both at USCIS and how quickly, and some of the consulates. But unfortunately, the practice, in the 20 plus years that I've been practicing, has become more difficult to some extent, John. There's more opportunities to do good lawyering, but the agency also, they have funding issues. USCIS, I mean, you have a different interpretation of the CSPA by USCIS and the Department of State, for Christ's sake. And they cannot reconcile it, or they haven't, or they refuse. I mean, I don't even know what to tell you. I mean, I started seeing for the first time in my career E2s, 214B denials. I just,
So E2,
I didn't see it for the first 20 years of my career on an E2 with a substantial investment, a real company, on a 214B denial. I had never seen it.
Yeah, it's been 2 or 3 years. I saw on listservs people posting about that. I'm like, E2? That's like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you? Even in the manual policy manual, from what I recall, ETs are essentially semi-dual intent visas on their own anyways. It's like, the last thing you want to do is, it's just a mess. It's so hard, especially E2, because you have to invest the money essentially first. It's like the biggest gamble possible. And I'm like, when I have consultations about this, I look at people like, invest all your money, and then who knows when your embassy appointment is going to happen, depending on which embassy you're at. Who knows if you're admin processing, and then maybe they'll give you a visa, and your money and business just sitting here and gathering dust. And who knows? It's like, it's a great opportunity, but practically speaking, it's a lot of pressure on people to put a large chunk of some of their life savings into something that's completely unknown. And
completely agree. And now that you've had some of these 214B denials, they don't tell you why, because it wasn't marginality, it wasn't the amount of the investment, it wasn't. I mean, you got 214B denial on an E2, and they can do it. And I was at a forum in Tokyo in an EB-5. And I asked some of the U.S. consular officials, look, about E2s and 214Bs, and they're like, well, it's at the discretion of the officer. And now, you can't sue them to find out.
That's done, yeah.
If you want to do a FOIA, you can't get it because there's an exemption under FOIA for visa records. So you're stuck with the, let's reapply in 6-7 months and see what conditions, and reading tea leaves, right? Well, what? Yeah. I suspect why my E2 was denied. It was a son. He had been here for a long time. He turned 21. Daddy gave him about $1.5 million. So I suspect those, but still, so what? You have the money. You're investing in a
Yeah.
company. The company employs people. But there's that those are the challenges that we're all facing now in
Yeah.
immigration, right? Crazy consulates, not adjudicating, and clients sometimes don't understand. They think that you could just pick up a phone and what's going on, and someone answers at the other end of the line and tells you.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that's the only prep question I had is being at the law firm that you're at that has a famous reputation and stuff. Do clients come to you thinking if they pay you, it's like they already think that they get a lawyer's guarantee, but do they have expectation like, okay, at your firm, everything's going to be a fix? How's that just like
It's
reality?
a challenge, but to be honest with you, one of the things that I've learned from Ira, obviously, our all of our mentors, the founding one, that to set expectations right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, no, I don't have a magic telephone number. I don't have a red phone where I could just call
Yeah.
and the U.S. consulate in Paris is going to answer our call. I mean, it's not like Batman. I can sue. I can do certain things, and setting the right expectations of what I can do,
Mm-hmm.
what's available for me in legal. Because, for example, again, I could do the inquiries, I could do the expedite processing, I could do all these legal maneuvering. But if you still want a decision after a reasonable period of time that we can discuss, mandamus may be your only way. Now, what's the downside of the mandamus? Legally, nothing. I mean, if you get denied a mandamus, okay, you didn't get your decision.
Yeah.
And if you get your decision, great. But it costs money. So setting the right expectations and delineating what the scope is right now. Because some people, for example, I've had a couple of clients saying, but why isn't it included to do the mandamus?
Yeah.
And, I'll just be quickly. It was a dentist. I said, look, if I go to your office and I tell you I have something and you tell me I have, one tooth that you got to fix, does that mean you're going to fix my mouth until I die? No. Okay. So same thing here. I mean, you had one issue. I'm charging you for a different issue. But I think explaining and having a good retainer agreement that explains what you're paying me for what scope helps in delineating what I can do for you and what I cannot do for you. And we're trying to be very transparent that there is no magic telephone number that I could just get it done.
Yeah. I once had this psychologist or psychotherapist, one of those kind of medical people, and she didn't want to pay a consultation fee. I'm like, well, do you have a consultation fee if someone comes talk to you first? Like, yeah. And I'm like, well, it's the same here. I got to sit and talk with you, get to know us since time. So, well, you're not a doctor. I'm like, well, I have a Juris Doctor of what it is, but it is what it is. So sometimes the professionals are tougher than the regular people when it comes to these kind of things.
I agree with you, but you know what? In some respects, I mean, and I've learned this very early. I mean, I exercise judgment. Sometimes I waive a consultation because it's a pro bono or whatever. But if people don't want to pay a consultation, I mean, you know this. We could be doing consultations into infinity.
Exactly. There's no time that, because you had 50 people a day ask you. So that it frustrates people. I try to explain this. I've kind of given up because it takes so much time. Listen, there was a little bit like, okay, it is what it is. It's our firm. And, we only got a few bad reviews on Google for our company. And all of them are like, oh, he charged a consultation fee. What a bad person. I'm like, okay, go somewhere. I don't want to tell you. But it's not bad because when people review that, they see that's the only bad stuff. It actually has the opposite effect, has a positive effect on the firm.
Correct. The only bad review I ever gotten was precisely something related to that, and the person threatened me that give me back the consultation because I don't like, and when I say to sometimes you have a consultation, I said, look, I'm like a doctor. If you're dying of cancer and I do the test and it turns out that you're dying of cancer and there is no chemo and does the doctor charge you for the testing and all that? Yes, even though he cannot cure you, you're dying of cancer. So I told the person, look, there's nothing. Well, give me back my money. No, but I just spent half an hour talking to you. He said, well, if you don't give me back my money, I'm going to put a bad review. And I said, you're threatening me? I said, look, if you would have said my family is in the hospital, it was the last 100, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I could exercise judgment and be nice, but yes, we live in an era that and I say this to people: do you go to McDonald's and buy a Big Mac and say I'll be back Friday to pay for it?
Let me try out the burger first. If I like it, I'll buy the rest.
At a minimum.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, John. I really appreciate it. Do you have any conferences that you're coming to? I bet you got a bunch of stuff you're speaking at in the upcoming months. Are you any of the other conferences or anything else?
Yeah, I'm very involved in an organization called IIUSA, which is an EB-5 organization, Invest in America. So I'm speaking in some forums there on EB-5 and meeting with some members of Congress because EB-5 sunsets in 2027. As crazy as it is, it's not a permanent law.
Yeah.
We got a 5-year extension in 2022, but the wise men in Congress have decided not to make it permanent. So even though it brings billions of dollars of investment into the United States, we still live with that uncertainty. So doing a lot of work on that arena to try to get it permanent.
In my career, every 5 years when this comes up, it's nail biting because these people have people already invested. It shuts them out. It's crazy to run a program like this where you're like, maybe it'll be there, maybe it won't, maybe it'll get like, it's like,
let's pray it's there. I mean, it's crazy, John. But anyways, a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for the invite. You know, anytime I can help, please.
I appreciate it. If you want to reach out to your firm, what's the best way to contact you?
Through the emails. I think we communicated to some of the emails, my assistant, etc. I know you're super busy, so, but yeah, emails.
Okay, sure. I'll go to the format, best way to do it if we reach out. Thanks a lot, John. I'll be in touch soon. I'll get this video out. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity.